Well, joining me now is the Senior Advisor to Benjamin Netanyahu, MarkRegev. Mr. Regev, thank you for joining me. In the last 2 hours, a letter from a number of Conservative members of Parliament has gone to the Foreign Secretary David Cameron, in which they're demanding that the UK no longer abstain on resolutions calling for ceasefires at the UN, and saying thousands of bodies lie under the rubble. In particular, a number of women and children have been killed is profoundly shocking. Too many Palestinians have died. And then this key line: by any measure, we are witnessing a catastrophe of precisely the kind the 1949 Geneva Conventions were supposed to prevent. What is your response to that?
I think they're wrong. I think Israel, as you said correctly, Piers, Israel is acting to defend itself, to destroy a brutal and ruthless and horrific enemy, Hamas, which is guilty of the most terrible crimes against humanity. And our challenge here is to dismantle Hamas's military capabilities when Hamas, of course, embeds itself amongst the civilian population, in neighborhoods, in hospitals, in schools, in mosques, and so forth, even in UN facilities. And so we're trying to be as surgical as is humanly possible in a very difficult combat situation.
Let me interrupt you there, if I may, because you say you're being surgical, and you always say this, that you're being very precise, very careful not to kill civilians. But in the last 2 days alone, we've seen 3 Israeli hostages who had no shirts on, who had a self-made SOS banner that they were holding. They were clearly not terrorists, and they were shot dead by Israeli forces. And then we have these 2 women killed outside a Catholic church, and that the Pope has called terrorism based on his information that he's got from the Archbishop in Jerusalem. This is, I'm afraid, not indicative of a fighting force that is trying to be surgical or precise. It is actually lending, I would say, support to the notion that President Biden put out, that it's indiscriminate.
So let's talk about those 2 issues specifically. Let's start with the 3 hostages who were tragically killed. You know, the fighting in Gaza, in that particular part of Gaza, has been very intense, close quarter combat, face-to-face fighting, and it's very difficult. And our soldiers claim, and this is being investigated, of course, that obviously they perceive the 3 as a threat, incorrectly and tragically. You know, in all sorts of urban warfare, you have what the experts call blue on blue shooting.
They were waving a white
fire.
They were waving a white piece of cloth with SOS.
Master move.
You know, they were clearly not Hamas terrorists, unless you've been killing a number of Hamas terrorists who've been waving white cloths with SOS and surrender on them, which I don't think you have. These people were killed, and they were turned out to be Israeli hostages. I mean, it's an absolute tragedy. But to simply dismiss it as sort of blue on blue, it seems to me it wasn't an accident. They were deliberately killed, and they were literally holding a cloth saying SOS. I mean, it's hard to think of a more blatant killing of innocent people than this, isn't it?
It's worse than blue and blue because they are civilians. They weren't even combatants, yes? And they were freeing, obviously, running away from Hamas. One of our problems in this was the soldiers on the ground did not have a briefing that they could expect to see hostages walking down the street, so to speak. We expected to see hostages in tunnels, in dark rooms, imprisoned, and the idea that they'd be walking around somehow free was a surprise.
Why would they shoot anybody holding an SOS banner? Would they shoot a Palestinian that was doing that? A Palestinian civilian?
Your assumption, which could be correct, Piers, but it also might be incorrect, is that the soldiers who fired the shots saw all that. And this has to be investigated. Obviously, when it was over, all this was discovered. But we have to find out, and it has to be investigated, what did the soldiers see at the time? It's clear that they perceived that this was a threat. And we know that there was fighting in that area. There was hostile fire from the location, more or less, where the 3 were coming from, both before and after this tragic event. So we have to investigate, we have to get to the bottom. But I can tell you this, the chief of staff of the Israeli military, the most high senior officer in uniform, he spoke publicly earlier. And he said very clearly, of course, that the idea of shooting someone who is holding a white flag and so forth, that is against our code. That's against our rules of engagement. He was crystal clear. And he even stressed it's not connected to them being hostages. Even if they had been Gazan Palestinians, that would have been wrong behavior against our code of conduct. And let me explain why. For 2 reasons. One, for moral reasons. It's against the morality of the army, but also from a tactical point of view, because if you can take prisoners, then you get information, you get intelligence.
So how is this happened?
The idea. So it was obviously it has to be investigated, but the chief of staff said clearly this is against our code of conduct.
What has happened to the IDF soldiers who fired the bullets?
So there's an investigation going on, and
the question is, what did they see? Have they been withdrawn from the battlefield?
Well, first of all, we have to see what the investigation comes out.
How do you investigate if they're still out there fighting? Have you brought them back?
No, I'm sure the ways the military does these investigations is always very thorough because we want to learn the lessons. And let's be frank, the families of the 3 people...
Just to be clear, do you know if they're still in active fighting? Or whether the soldiers responsible have been withdrawn?
I don't have the answer to that question. I simply don't know. I can ask the military and get you an answer.
I mean,
I can
surely
say
you would
this.
agree with me. It'd be pretty extraordinary if they're still out there having committed this atrocity. That's what it is. I mean, it's a tragedy. It's also an atrocity. 3 hostages who were literally fleeing for their lives to what they thought was the safety of their own side have been just killed in cold blood, having held a sign up saying SOS. I mean, at the very least, I think the world would expect that the people concerned who fired those bullets have been withdrawn from active service until this is properly investigated.
So once again, I'll ask the IDF, but I can say the following, that there was no attempt at all to try to hush things up. We openly admitted this. The army came straight out and spoke to the families and said this was a terrible accident and it will be looked into and there'll be a thorough investigation. And the evidence and what the investigation reveals will be shared with the families of the 3 hostages who were killed. We're going to be, the army's going to be very transparent on what's happened here. We owe it to ourselves so these things don't happen again, and we owe it to the families.
Are you going to be as transparent about what happened at the Catholic Church that the Pope described as an act of terrorism, and given the Archbishop of Westminster says he simply doesn't believe the IDF when it claims it didn't do it?
So we'll investigate that as well. We are in the process of doing so. We're looking at the situation closely.
You must know if your snipers did it.
We at the moment, yes, I can say the following. Our forces do not deliberately target civilians. We definitely don't deliberately target...
Was it IDF snipers who fired the bullets?
So once again, we don't... This is still being investigated, but I can say the following, Piers. We don't deliberately target civilians.
Well, so you keep saying, Mr. Regev, but with respect,
church.
We're talking about 2 incidents where that's exactly what's happened. And why it's happened is crucially important to the credibility of the wider statements that you've been making on behalf of the Israeli government about whether you are being indiscriminate. That's why it's so important. And again, I just ask you a simple question. You must know, you knew immediately you'd fired the bullets to kill the hostages. You must equally have known immediately whether your snipers have shot these 2 women outside a Catholic church. You literally just have to ask the question. So this happened over the weekend. You must have had enough time now to establish, was it Israeli snipers? Because earlier today you were denying it, you're denying the suggestion it may have been IDF, but the Archbishop says that's a lie. So what is the situation with these killings?
So let me please answer by saying what needs to be said. It's not like someone Israeli sitting around with a gun and indiscriminately shooting. We're talking about combat zones where
that
often,
wasn't my question,
you're coming under fire.
Did IDF soldiers shoot those 2 women? You know the answer.
It's still be looked into, and I'm sure that we'll be putting out a report. I can't prejudge the IDF's report, Piers. You understand that?
You've already prejudged you've already prejudged the killing of the hostages and said you know for a fact you did that. Why do you not know for a fact you killed these 2 women or not?
Because we had the bodies here of the 3, and there was immediately shown to be true. I'm not sure we've got the bodies of the 2 women. I don't know where they are. I don't know what the situation is. We will get to the bottom of it.
But if it wasn't IDF, who were these snipers who killed 2 women outside a Catholic church in Gaza?
Well, because we know there was fire there. You see, the way it's being presented incorrectly is that somehow there was people at a church going to pray or praying and suddenly the IDF came and attacked. No, that wasn't the situation, Piers. We know there were firefights in that area. We know our forces took hostile fire. So it's quite possible that it was Israeli forces, but it's also possible that it was bullets from the other side.
Yeah, but I think you're stretching but you are stretching my credulity to try and make me think you don't know the answer after all this time, given how clear you've been about the other incident and IDF culpability.
So I'm sure a full IDF report will come out shortly, and I urge you, please be patient. It's worthwhile waiting for the full report.
And if it transpires, as everybody believes, and as the Archbishop of Westminster said, it come directly from information on the ground that he believed was credible, relayed to him by the Archbishop of Jerusalem, and what the Pope himself has called an act of terrorism, if that turns out to be indeed the work of the IDF again, what would your response be?
So I can give you from an example from the past, Piers, where there was a situation on the beach in Gaza. This was in one of the previous rounds of conflict, and I remember it well because I was personally involved.
I don't want to go into previous incidents.
No, because I'm giving you precedent.
Well, the Pope has directly accused you of terrorism.
No, but
so I mean, I do think it's incumbent on you as a government to very, very, very quickly tell the world what happened here. Citing previous incidents in previous wars and conflicts is kind of meaningless, frankly. I mean,
no, but judge us by our track record, because in the past we have come clean when there was an accident and we misidentified a target and we killed innocent people, and that's what I'm starting to tell you. We have come and admitted that we've made a mistake.
But you must know if you had snipers in that area by that church who shot people. You must know that.
But if there was a firefight and there was shooting from both sides, we have to look into this.
I'm agreeing with you. There were Hamas terrorists. Just to be clear, your position is there were Hamas terrorists inside a Catholic church with a bunch of nuns and women.
I didn't say that. I said in the location of the church.
When do you think?
And they were firing at our people. Okay, and our forces returned fire.
But if it turns out, as the Pope has alleged, and in fact stated as fact, it was an act of terrorism, what will Israel do about that?
But can I say the following, which I don't accept in the accusations? I can accept the possibility that they were killed unintentionally, caught up in the crossfire. I do not accept that they were deliberately targeted by the IDF. We do not target civilians. We do not target churches.
Right.
And
But unfortunately,
terrorism,
the
the
problem
definition
is,
of terrorism,
I know, but the problem is, again, with respect,
is
Mr.
the
Regev,
deliberate targeting of the innocent.
yes, I know,
You
but
said it on your program.
unfortunately, in the last 48 hours, you have shot and killed 3 Israeli hostages, and it is believed IDF forces have also shot and killed 2 completely innocent women outside a Catholic church. So this constant refrain that you're not targeting innocent civilians is not borne out by the reality of IDF forces targeting and killing innocent civilians.
No, but no, I disagree. And if you'll allow me to finish the sentence, please, Piers. There's a huge difference between a policy that deliberately targets civilians, that's what Hamas does, yes, and between civilians inadvertently getting caught up in the crossfire between combatants, between the Israeli forces.
Well, you call it crossfire, but
the
the allegation is that all 5 of these victims were deliberately shot dead. The 2 women by snipers and the 3 hostages by IDF
in the first
forces.
place, no, let's be clear. If there is a trial, right, let's say the accusation against the soldiers who killed the 3 hostages, it wouldn't be a murder trial. It would be a trial if there was a trial, and I don't know there will be, yes, but they would be accused of negligence or of misidentifying a target, yes. Murder and terrorism is the deliberate targeting of the incident.
I understand.
And it's not clear that in either of these cases that applies.
Right, but it may well be that that's what happened. You can't rule that out either.
Well, that's why you've got to do an investigation.
Right. But, it shouldn't take very long to ask whether you had snipers in that area who shot women outside a church.
But I know for a fact we had combatants in the area, but the fact is, did they, in fact, fire the bullets that killed the 2 women? Once again, let's wait for the investigation. And as I said, in the past, when we've made mistakes, we have admitted it. There's a track record there. I wanted
to show you a picture. This is of IDF bombs. And they've inscribed on them the names of actually a number of people who've been guests on this show. Mohammed Hijab, Andrew Tate, and also one of my next guests, Cenk Uygur. What is your response to that?
Maybe IDF soldiers are watching your show. Is that possible?
Yeah, but do you think it's a sensible thing to be doing, to be putting names like this on these bombs?
Well, first of all, it's obviously this is some soldiers trying to be funny or creative, but there's a history here going back to the First World War, isn't there not, of soldiers drawing pictures on shells and so forth? It's something that soldiers have done. I'm not justifying it, but I think British soldiers have done it.
Sounds like you are justifying it to me.
Sorry, no, I'm just putting it into historical context.
Okay. MarkRegev, I appreciate you joining me. Thank you very much.